Chapter 35 The Knight in Shining Armor. Despereaux was pondering the reverse of that question. He was wondering not what he would do with his tail, but what he would do without it. He was sitting on a bag of flour high atop a shelf in the pantry, crying for what he had lost. The pain in his hindquarters was intense, and he wept because of it. But he also cried because he was happy. He was out of the dungeon. He had been recalled to life. His rescue had happened just in time for him to save the Princess P from the terrible fate that the rat had planned for her. So Despereaux wept with joy, and with pain, and with gratitude. He wept with exhaustion, and despair, and hope. He wept with all the emotions of a young, small mouse who had been sent to his death and then been delivered from it in time to save his beloved can feel. Reader, the mouse wept, and then he lay down on the sack of flour and slept. Outside the castle, the sun set and the stars came out one by one, and then they disappeared and gave way to the rising sun, and still Despereaux slept. And while he slept, he dreamt. He dreamt of the stained-glass windows and the dark of the dungeon. In Despereaux's dreams, the light came to life, brilliant and glorious, and in the shape of a knight swinging a sword. The knight fought the dark, and the dark took many shapes. First, the dark was his mother, uttering phrases in French, and then the dark became his father, beating the drum. The dark was Furlough, wearing a black hood and shaking his head no, and the dark became a huge rat, smiling a smile that was evil and sharp. The dark, Despereaux cried, turning his head to the left. The light, he murmured, turning his head to the right. He called out to the knight. He shouted, "Who are you? Will you save me?" But the knight did not answer him. "Tell me who you are," Despereaux shouted. The knight stopped swinging his sword. He looked at Despereaux. "You know me," he said. "No," said Despereaux, "I don't." "You do," said the knight. He slowly took the armor off his head and revealed nothing. No one. The suit of armor was empty. "No, oh no," said Despereaux. "There is no knight in shining armor. It's all just make-believe, like Happily Ever After." And in his sleep, reader, the small mouse began to cry. Chapter 36 What Mig Carried. And while the mouse slept, Roscurreau put his terrible plan into effect. Would you like to hear, reader, how it all unfolded? The story is not a pretty one. There is violence in it, and cruelty. But stories that are not pretty have a certain value too, I suppose. Everything, as you well know, having lived in this world long enough to have figured out a thing or two for yourself, cannot always be sweetness and light. Listen, this is how it happened. First, the rat finished once and for all the job he had started long ago. He chewed through Gregory's ropes, and all the way through it, so that the jailer became lost in the maze of the dungeon. Late at night, when the castle was dark, the serving girl, Miggery Sow, climbed the stairs to the princess's room. In her hand she carried a candle, and in the pockets of her apron were two very ominous things. In the right pocket, hidden in case they should encounter anyone on the stairs, was a rat with a spoon on his head and a cloak of red around his shoulders. In the left pocket was a kitchen knife, the same knife that Miggery Sow had used to cut off the tail of a certain mouse. These were the things, a rat, and a knife, and a candle, that Mig carried with her as she climbed up, up, up the stairs. "Gore," she shouted to the rat, "it's dark, ain't it?" "Yes, yes," whispered Roscurreau from her pocket. "It is quite dark, my dear." "When I'm princess," began Meg. "Shh," said Roscurreau. "May I suggest that you keep your glorious plans for the future to yourself? And may I further suggest that you keep your voice down to a whisper? We are, after all, on a covert mission. Do you know how to whisper, my dear?" "I do," shouted Meg. "Then please," said Roscurreau, "please insinuate this knowledge immediately." "Gore," whispered Meg. "All right." "Thank you," said Roscurreau. "Do I need to review with you again our plan of action?" "I got it all straight, right here in my head, whispered Mig, and she tapped the side of her head with one finger. How comforting, said Roscoe. Perhaps, my dear, we should go over it again, one more time, just to be sure. Well, said Mig, we go into the princess's room, and she will be sleeping and snoozing and snoring, and I will wake her up and show her the knife and say, If you does not want to get hurt, princess, you must come with me. And you will not hurt her, said Roscoe. No, I won't, because I want her to live, so that she can be my lady-in-waiting when I become the princess. Exactly, said Roscoe. That will be her divine comeuppance. Gore, whispered Mig. Yes, her divine comeuppance. Mig had, of course, no idea what the phrase divine comeuppance meant, but she very much liked the sound of it, and she repeated it over and over to herself, and Roscoe said, And then, continued Meg, I'll tell her she got out of her princess bed and come with me on a little journey. Ha, said Roscoe, a little journey, that is right. Ha, I love the understatement of that phrase, a little journey. Oh, it will be a little journey indeed, it will. And then, said Mig, who is now coming to her favorite part of the plan, we will take her to the deep downs, and we gives her some long lessons in how to be a servant girl, and we gives me some short lessons in how to be a princess. And when we is all done studying up, we switch places. I gets to be the princess, and she gets to be the maid. Gore! Reader, this is the very plan that Roscoe presented to Mig when he first met her. It was, of course, a ridiculous plan. No one would ever, not for one blind minute, mistake Mig for the princess, or the princess for Mig. But Miggery Sow, as I pointed out to you before, was not the sharpest knife in the drawer. And reader, too, she wanted so desperately to become a princess. She wanted, oh, how she wanted. And it was because of this terrible wanting that she was able to believe in Roscoe's plan with every ounce of her heart. The rat's real plan was, in a way, more simple and more terrible. He intended to take the princess to the deepest, darkest part of the dungeon. He intended to have Mig put chains on the princess's hand and her feet, and he intended to keep the glittering, glowing, laughing princess there in the dark, forever. Chapter 37. A Small Taste. She was asleep and dreaming of her mother, the queen, who was holding a spoon to her and saying, Taste this, my sweet pea. Taste this, my darling, and tell me what you think. The princess leaned forward and sipped some soup from the spoon her mother held out to her. Oh, Mamma, she said, it's wonderful. It's the best soup I have ever eaten. Yes, said the queen, it is wonderful, isn't it? May I have some more? Said the pea. I gave you a small taste so that you would not forget, said her mother. I gave you a small taste that you would remember. I want more. But as soon as the princess said this, her mother was gone. She disappeared, and the bowl and the soup spoon disappeared with her. Lost things, said the pea. More lost things. And then she heard her name. She turned, happy, thinking that her mother had come back. But the voice was not her mother's. The voice belonged to somebody else, and it was coming from someplace far away, and it was telling her to wake up. Wake up! The pea opened her eyes and saw Miggery Sow standing over her bed, a knife in one hand and a candle in the other. Mig, she said. Gore, said Mig softly. Say it, commanded Roscoe. Mig closed her eyes and shouted her piece. If you does not want to get hurt, princess, you must come with me. Whatever for? Said the princess in an annoyed voice. As I have noted before, the princess was not a person who was used to being told what to do. What are you talking about? Meg opened her eyes and shouted, You got to come with me, so after we take some lessons, you some long lessons and me some short ones, together way down in the deep downs, I can be you and you can be me. No, shouted Roscoe from Meg's pocket. No, you are doing it wrong. Who said that?" "Your Highness," said Roscuro, and he crawled out of Meg's pocket and made his way up to her shoulder and situated himself there, laying his tail across her neck to balance himself. "Your Highness," he began, and he raised a spoon slowly off his head and smiled, displaying his mouth full of truly hideous teeth. "I think it would be best of you to do as Miggery Sal suggested. She is, as you can see, quite clearly, in possession of a knife, a large knife, and she will, if pushed, use it." "This is ridiculous," said the princess. "You can't threaten me. I'm a princess." "We," said Roscuro, "are all too aware of the fact of what you are. A knife, however, cares nothing for the fact that you are royalty, and you will bleed, I assume, just like any other human." The pea looked at Meg. Meg smiled. The knife glinted in the light of the candle. "Meg?" she said, her voice shaking the tiniest bit. "I really do not think," said Roscuro, "that Meg would need much persuasion to use the knife. Princess, she is a dangerous individual, easily led." "But we are friends," said the pea. "Aren't we, Meg?" Said Meg. "Trust me," said Roscuro. "You are not friends, and I think it would be best if you addressed all your communications to me, Princess. I am the one in charge here. Look at me." The pea looked right directly at the rat and at the spoon on his head. Her heart skipped one beat and then two. "Do you know me, Princess?" "No," she said, lowering her head. "I don't know you." But, reader, she did know him. He was the rat who had fallen in her mother's soup. He was wearing her dead mother's spoon on his head. The princess kept her head down. She concentrated on containing the rage that was leaping up inside of her. "Look again, Princess. Or can you not bear to look? Does it pain your royal sensibilities to let your eyes rest on a rat?" "I don't know you," she said, "and I am not afraid to look at you." The pea raised her head slowly. Her eyes were defiant. She stared at the rat. "Very well," said Roscuro. "Have it your way. You do not know me. None the less, you must do as I say. As my friend here has a knife. So get out of the bed, Princess. We are going on a little journey. I would like it if you dressed in your loveliest gown, the one you were wearing at a banquet not so long ago." "And put on your crown," said Meg. "Put that on your princess head." "Yes," said Roscuro. "Please, Princess, do not forget your crown." The pea, still standing at Roscuro, pushed the covers back and got out of bed. "Move quickly," said Roscuro. "We must take our little journey while it is still dark and while the rest of the castle sleeps on." "Ignorant, oh, so ignorant, I am afraid of your fate." The princess took a gown from her closet. "Yes," said Roscuro to himself. "That is the one, the very one. Look how it sparkles in the light. Lovely." "I will need someone to do my buttons," said the princess as she stepped into the dress. "Meg, you must help me." "Little princess," said Roscuro, "do you think that you can outsmart a rat? Our dear Miggery Sal will not lay down her knife, not even for a moment. Will you, Miggery Sal? Because that might ruin your chances of becoming a princess. Isn't that right?" "Gore," said Meg, "that's right." And so while Meg held the knife pointed in the direction of the princess, the pea sat and let the rat crawl over her back, doing her buttons up for her, one by one. The princess held very still. The only movement she allowed herself was this. She licked her lips over and over again, because she thought that she could taste there was a sweet saltiness of the soup that her mother had fed her in her dream. "I have not forgotten, Mamma," she whispered. "I have not forgotten you. I have not forgotten soup."